In 2026, Windows is still everywhere. It boots up in offices every morning. It powers laptops in universities. It runs in government buildings, cyber cafes, startups, and homes. For many people, Windows feels like the default state of computing itself. Not a choice, but a given. You buy a computer, it has Windows. You start a job, the PC runs Windows. You open a classroom, the projector connects to a Windows machine. And because it is so familiar, so widespread, and so deeply embedded in daily workflows, very few people stop to question what it truly costs to stay on Windows. Not the obvious price on the box, not just the license key, but the hidden cost that accumulates quietly over years. In 2026, those hidden costs are no longer minor inconveniences. They are structural, financial, technical, and even psychological costs that shape how individuals and organizations work, innovate, and protect themselves. At first glance, Windows looks cheaper than ever. In many regions, it comes pre-installed. You don't pay directly for it. You don't see a bill arrive every month. But the cost is simply disguised. Hardware vendors bake the Windows license into the price of the laptop or desktop. Even if you never asked for Windows, even if you plan to wipe the system and install something else, you already paid for it. Multiply that hidden license fee across hundreds or thousands of machines in a company, school, or government department, and the cost becomes massive. In 2026, when organizations are under pressure to cut budgets, reduce waste, and justify every expense, silently paying for software you may not fully control or even need is a cost that rarely shows up in spreadsheets but always exists in reality. Then there is the cost of forced upgrades. Windows in 2026 is no longer a static operating system you install once and forget. It is a constantly shifting platform driven by Microsoft's update cycles, security policies, feature rollouts, and deprecations. Hardware that worked perfectly fine 5 years ago may suddenly be deemed unsupported. A processor that is still fast enough for daily work may fail a compatibility check. A system that runs smoothly may be blocked from receiving the latest updates unless you upgrade hardware. This forces organizations and individuals into an artificial upgrade cycle. Perfectly usable machines are retired not because they are broken, but because Windows no longer wants to run on them. The financial cost of replacing hardware earlier than necessary is enormous, but the environmental cost is even greater. E-waste piles up, manufacturing demand increases, and sustainability goals quietly collapse under the pressure of software-driven obsolescence. Security is another area where the hidden cost of staying on Windows in 2026 becomes painfully clear. Windows remains the primary target for malware, ransomware, spyware, and phishing attacks. Not because it is inherently evil, but because of its market dominance. Attackers go where the users are. As long as Windows holds a massive share of desktops, it will continue to attract the most sophisticated threats. In 2026, ransomware attacks are no longer rare news stories. They are routine events. Hospitals, schools, logistics companies, and small businesses regularly find their systems locked, their data encrypted, and their operations frozen. The cost is not just the ransom itself, but downtime, data loss, reputational damage, legal consequences, and long-term mistrust. Staying on Windows means constantly living under this threat, constantly patching, constantly reacting, constantly hoping the next update closes the hole before someone exploits it. And updates themselves carry a hidden cost. Windows updates in 2026 are larger, more frequent, and more complex than ever before. They can interrupt workflows, reboot systems at inconvenient times, break drivers, and introduce new bugs while fixing old ones. For an individual, this may be a minor annoyance. For a business, it can mean hours of lost productivity across an entire team. IT departments spend countless hours testing updates, rolling them out, rolling them back, and dealing with the aftermath when something goes wrong. This is time that could have been spent improving systems, training staff, or building new solutions. Instead, it is spent babysitting an operating system that insists on changing itself on its own schedule. Vendor lock-in is another cost that is rarely discussed openly, but deeply felt over time. Windows is not just an operating system. It is an ecosystem tightly integrated with Microsoft services, formats, and work. Office files, Active Directory, Azure integration, proprietary APIs, and licensing models all encourage dependence on Microsoft's stack. Once deeply embedded, moving away becomes difficult and expensive. Data migrations become complex. Staff need retraining. Legacy applications may not run elsewhere. This lock-in reduces flexibility and bargaining power. In 2026, When technology strategy is a key competitive advantage, being locked into a single vendor's roadmap, pricing, and priorities can quietly limit innovation and autonomy. Performance degradation is another subtle but persistent cost. Over time, Windows systems tend to accumulate background services, STARTUP programs, telemetry processes, and legacy components designed to maintain compatibility with decades-old software. Even on modern hardware, this overhead adds up. Users often compensate by buying more powerful machines than they actually need. More RAM, faster, CPUs, larger SSDs, all purchased not to run demanding applications, but to make the operating system feel responsive. This is a hidden tax on hardware resources. The machine is powerful, not because your work demands it, but because the operating system consumes a significant portion of that power just to exist. Privacy is also a growing concern in 2026, and staying on Windows comes with trade-offs that many users are not fully aware of. Telemetry, diagnostics, usage data, and cloud integration are deeply embedded into modern Windows versions. While Microsoft argues that this data improves security and user experience, the reality is that users and organizations have limited transparency and control over what is collected and how it is used. For individuals, this means sacrificing a degree of digital privacy. For businesses, especially those dealing with sensitive data, it introduces compliance and trust issues. The cost here is not measured in dollars, but in control, confidence, and peace of mind. Another hidden cost lies in software licensing complexity. In 2026, Windows licensing is no longer straightforward, especially for enterprises. Different editions, subscription models, cloud dependencies, and usage restrictions create confusion and risk. Misunderstanding a license term can lead to audits, penalties, or forced upgrades. Companies often hire consultants or dedicate staff just to manage licensing compliance. This administrative overhead is a real cost, even if it doesn't appear directly on a purchase invoice. There is also a cultural cost to staying on Windows that is rarely acknowledged. When users grow up believing that Windows is the only normal way to use a computer, creativity and experimentation can suffer. Alternative operating systems, workflows, and tools are dismissed as niche or risky. This mindset can limit technical literacy and adaptability. In a world where technology evolves rapidly, the ability to learn new systems and think beyond defaults is valuable. Staying on Windows by inertia rather than choice can quietly erode that adaptability. From a developer's perspective, the hidden cost becomes even clearer. While Windows has improved significantly for development in recent years, many modern development tools, servers, and workflows are still more naturally aligned with Unix-like systems. Developers on Windows often rely on layers of abstraction, compatibility tools, or virtual environments to replicate production environments. Each layer adds complexity, potential bugs, and cognitive load. Time spent fighting the environment is time not spent building products. Over years, this inefficiency compounds into real financial and creative costs. Education systems also bear hidden costs. Schools and universities that rely heavily on Windows must budget for licenses, hardware upgrades, antivirus solutions, and IT support. These costs divert funds away from teaching, research, and student support. Students trained exclusively on Windows may graduate with limited exposure to alternative systems widely used in servers, research, and high-performance computing. This skills gap has long-term economic consequences that extend far beyond the classroom. Even at the individual level, staying on Windows in 2026 carries a psychological cost. The constant alerts, notifications, warnings, updates, and security prompts create a background noise that fragments attention. Users become conditioned to click yes later or restart now without fully understanding what is happening. This learned helplessness reduces confidence and control. The computer feels less like a tool you command and more like a system you negotiate with. None of this means that Windows is useless or doomed. In 2026, it remains a powerful, capable platform with vast software support and a familiar interface. For many users, it still gets the job done. But the hidden cost of staying on Windows is the cost of not questioning it. It is the cost of accepting defaults without reflection. It is the cost of trading long-term flexibility for short-term comfort. When you add up the financial waste of forced upgrades, the security risks, the productivity losses, the privacy compromises, the environmental impact, and the lost opportunities for innovation, the true price becomes clear. The most expensive part of staying on Windows in 2026 is not the license fee or the hardware upgrade. It is the invisible accumulation of small compromises that, over time, shape how you work, how much control you have, and how prepared you are for the future. And the moment you start to see those costs, you realize that the real question is no longer whether Windows is good or bad, but whether staying on it by default is still worth what it quietly takes from you every single day.